The sun hung low over Lexington, Kentucky, casting a golden glow over the streets. Officer Daniel Hayes adjusted his rearview mirror as he sat in his patrol car, idly scanning the traffic ahead. His partner, Lauren Mitchell, tapped her pen against her notepad, jotting down observations from their earlier call. They were parked near Ashen Avenue, where the neighborhood transitioned from modest single-family homes to upscale condominiums. That's when Daniel's eyes locked on a sleek black vehicle cruising past them. The driver, an African-American woman dressed in a tailored navy blue suit, had her hair neatly styled and her posture upright and poised. Something about the way she carried herself seemed to irritate Daniel. "Look at that," he muttered, his tone dripping with disdain. "Fancy car. Bet she's up to something." Lauren looked up from her notes. "She's not speeding or breaking any laws," she replied cautiously. "What's the problem?" Daniel ignored her and reached for the flashing lights. "Let's find out," he said with a smirk, pulling onto the road behind the car. The driver slowed and signaled before pulling over to the side of the street, her movements deliberate, almost practiced. Lauren noticed her shoulders stiffen slightly through the rear window as Daniel parked and stepped out of the patrol car. "Daniel, this doesn't feel right," Lauren whispered as she hurried after him. "You don't even have probable cause." "Stay back, rookie," Daniel snapped, his hand brushing against his holster. "I've been doing this for 20 years. I know a suspect when I see one." As they approached, the window lowered, revealing Rachel Turner. Her expression was calm but wary, her dark eyes assessing the two officers with quiet determination. "Good evening, officers," Rachel said evenly. "Is there a problem?" Daniel leaned in, his shadow falling across the interior of her car. "License and registration," he barked, ignoring her question. Rachel's hands moved carefully to retrieve her documents, placing them on the dashboard before sliding them over. Lauren watched closely, noting the faint tremor in Rachel's fingers. Her instincts told her something was off, not with Rachel, but with Daniel. His demeanor had shifted from routine to unnecessarily aggressive. "What brings you to this part of town, Miss Turner?" Daniel asked as he scanned her documents, his tone sharp. Rachel tilted her head slightly, keeping her voice measured. "I'm on my way to a meeting." Daniel's lip curled. Must be some meeting driving a car like this. Lauren felt a knot form in her stomach. The tension was thick, and passers-by were starting to notice the interaction. She stepped closer to Daniel, her voice low. "Daniel, she's cooperating. Let's not escalate." But Daniel was already pulling on the driver's door handle. "Step out of the car," he ordered, his grip tightening around the door. Rachel's composure faltered for a moment. "Is there a reason for this?" she asked, her voice firm but calm. "I said step out," Daniel growled, yanking the door open. Rachel unbuckled her seatbelt, her movements deliberate, and stepped onto the pavement. Lauren's heart raced as she watched Daniel grab Rachel's arm with unnecessary force, pulling her to the side of the car. Rachel stumbled slightly, catching herself against the doorframe. "That's enough," Lauren blurted, stepping forward. Her voice trembled, but she held her ground. "She hasn't done anything wrong." Daniel shot her a glare. "Stay out of this, rookie." Rachel straightened her jacket, meeting Daniel's glare head-on. "This is harassment, Officer Hayes," she said, her voice steady. "I know my rights." Daniel smirked, leaning closer. "Out here, rights are what I say they are." Rachel's jaw tightened, but she didn't back down. Lauren, standing just a few feet away, felt a surge of conflicting emotions: fear, anger, and a growing sense of responsibility. This wasn't just another traffic stop. This was something much bigger. The tension around the car felt like a storm about to break. Daniel's grip on Rachel's arm tightened as he shoved her closer to the side of the car. Her bag tumbled from her shoulder, its contents scattering onto the pavement: keys, a phone, a small notepad. Rachel exhaled sharply but kept her composure. "This is completely unnecessary," Rachel said, her tone clipped but controlled. "I've complied with everything you've asked." Daniel scoffed, crouching down to pick through her belongings without permission. His movements were deliberate, calculated, as if he were searching for something to justify his behavior. "What's a woman like you doing driving a car like this?" he muttered. Lauren stepped closer, her hands clenched at her sides. "Daniel, this isn't protocol. We don't have probable cause to search her things." Daniel waved her off, not even bothering to look up. "You've got a lot to learn, rookie. This is how you keep the streets clean." Rachel's voice hardened. "Officer Hayes, you are violating my rights. You have no reason to search my property." Daniel straightened, holding up one of her credit cards as if it were a piece of incriminating evidence. "You don't get to lecture me, lady. You're in my town now." A small crowd began to gather on the sidewalk, their murmurs growing louder. Several people had their phones out, recording the scene. Rachel noticed but kept her eyes on Daniel, refusing to look away. Lauren felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She had seen it happen. Daniel had planted the evidence. She knew it was wrong, knew she should say something, but fear kept her rooted in place. Rachel turned her gaze to Lauren, her eyes pleading. "You saw what he did. Please say something." Lauren's throat felt tight, her voice trapped somewhere between her conscience and her fear of retaliation. She could feel Daniel's eyes on her, daring her to speak out. "Stay quiet," his gaze seemed to say, "or you'll regret it." But Lauren couldn't shake the image of Daniel slipping the bag into Rachel's car. Her father's words echoed in her mind, a lesson he had drilled into her since she was a child. "Integrity isn't easy, but it's what makes you a good person, Daniel." Lauren said, her voice trembling but audible. "This isn't right." Daniel rounded on her, his face dark with anger. "You don't know what you're talking about. Keep your mouth shut." Rachel stood tall, her voice steady despite the anger coursing through her. "You can't intimidate your way out of this. I know exactly what's happening here, and so does your partner." Daniel stepped closer to Rachel, his hand resting ominously near his holster. "You think you're untouchable because you drive a nice car? Let me tell you something. That's enough." Lauren snapped, louder than she intended. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't back down. "You're crossing the line." The crowd had grown larger now, and the weight of their stares bore down on the scene. Daniel hesitated, glancing around at the onlookers. He clenched his jaw but didn't say anything. Rachel took a deep breath and looked at Lauren, her voice calm but firm. "Thank you for speaking up, but this isn't over." Lauren nodded, a spark of determination flickering in her chest. For the first time, she felt like she had the courage to take a stand. Daniel's face twisted into a sneer as he turned his attention back to Rachel. The crowd was still watching, phones raised, documenting every second. He leaned closer to her, his voice a low growl meant only for her ears. "You think you're smarter than me? You think these people are going to help you?" Rachel met his glare head-on. "I don't think, Officer Hayes. I know I'm smarter than you. And you just made the biggest mistake of your career." Daniel's composure cracked for a moment, but he quickly masked it with a scoff. He pulled the handcuffs from his belt, stepping toward Rachel. "You're under arrest for possession of a controlled substance." Lauren felt her breath catch in her throat. This was it, the moment where she had to choose between her career and her conscience. Her father's words echoed in her mind. "If you don't stand up for what's right, you're just as guilty as the ones who do wrong." "No," Lauren said suddenly, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. She stepped between Daniel and Rachel, her hands raised defensively. "This isn't right, and you know it." Daniel's face flushed with anger. "Move out of the way, rookie. Don't make me report you for insubordination." Lauren's voice wavered, but she didn't move. "You planted that evidence. Saw you. I won't be a part of this." The crowd gasped, a ripple of shock spreading through the onlookers. Rachel's expression softened slightly, her gaze locking on Lauren. "Thank you," she said quietly. Daniel's fury boiled over. He stepped closer to Lauren, jabbing a finger toward her chest. You're done, do you hear me? I'll make sure you never wear that badge again. Lauren squared her shoulders, summoning every ounce of courage she had. If that's what it takes to do the right thing, so be it. Rachel, sensing the moment was at its tipping point, decided to speak. Officer Hayes, she said, her voice steady and commanding. You might want to think carefully about your next move. Daniel laughed bitterly. Oh yeah. And why is that? Rachel reached into her jacket pocket, moving slowly and deliberately. Both officers tensed, but she didn't flinch. She pulled out a leather badge holder and flipped it open, revealing her credentials. My name is Captain Rachel Turner, she said, her tone calm but firm. I'm the new commanding officer for this precinct. For a moment there was only silence. Daniel stared at the badge, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Lauren felt her knees weaken as the weight of the revelation hit her. That's not possible, Daniel stammered, his confidence crumbling. You can't be. Rachel interrupted him. You didn't even bother to ask before deciding I was a criminal, did you? But it shouldn't matter who I am. Every person deserves to be treated with respect, not judged by the color of their skin or the car they drive. Daniel's face paled as the crowd erupted into murmurs. Some people cheered. Others shouted angrily at him. The reality of what he had done, what had just been exposed, seemed to sink in. Lauren took a small step back, her mind reeling. Rachel turned to her, her expression softening. Officer Mitchell, I'm grateful you found the courage to speak up. It's not easy, but it's the right thing to do. Lauren swallowed hard, her voice trembling. I should have done it sooner. I'm sorry. Rachel nodded, a faint smile on her lips. You did it when it mattered. That's what counts. Daniel, still in shock, finally found his voice. Captain, I can explain. No, Rachel cut him off sharply. You can't. What you did today goes against everything this badge stands for. Hand over your weapon and badge. You're suspended, effective immediately. Daniel's hand shook as he unclipped his badge and holster. He glared at Rachel, his face twisted with anger and disbelief. You can't do this. You don't know what it's like out here. I've been protecting these streets for 20 years. Rachel's expression didn't waver. Protecting. Is that what you call this? How many lives have you destroyed with your prejudice, Daniel? How many people have you framed to feed your ego? The crowd, now emboldened by Rachel's presence, began shouting for justice. A woman in the front yelled, You're a disgrace to the uniform. Another added, We've been dealing with this for years. Lauren glanced at the growing crowd, her nerves fraying. This wasn't just about Daniel anymore. It was about a system that had let officers like him operate unchecked. Rachel stepped forward, her voice carrying a weight that silenced the noise. This isn't just about me, Rachel said, turning to address the crowd. It's about holding people like him accountable. It's about making sure that no one is above the law, not even the ones sworn to uphold it. Daniel's face reddened as he took a step closer to Rachel. You think you're some kind of hero. You don't know what it's like to deal with the real criminals out here. You sit behind a desk while I'm out risking my life. Rachel raised an eyebrow, her calm demeanor unwavering. And you think that justifies planting evidence? Using your authority to intimidate and degrade innocent people? You're not risking your life, Daniel. You're ruining others. Lauren felt her chest tighten as she watched the exchange. She'd always known there were cracks in the system, but seeing them this close was overwhelming. Rachel turned her attention back to Lauren, her voice softening. Officer Mitchell, Rachel said, I know this isn't easy for you, but speaking up today took courage. Don't lose that. Lauren nodded slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. I won't. Daniel, still holding his badge, looked at Rachel with a mixture of resentment and desperation. You're making a mistake, Captain. People like you don't last long in this job. Rachel stepped closer, her eyes locking onto his. People like me. You mean people who believe in justice, who believe in equality? If that's a mistake, it's one I'll gladly make. The crowd erupted in applause, their voices drowning out Daniel's protests. Rachel turned to the nearest bystander and said, "Thank you. Thank you for recording this. Make sure it gets shared." Daniel's face twisted in fury, but he said nothing. The wail of approaching sirens grew louder, signaling the arrival of backup. Rachel stood tall, her presence commanding.